Please accept. So welcome to our Designing Communities Fireside Chat. Before we proceed, I'll first introduce our lovely personalities tonight. First, we have Gwendolyn Ang. Since she was 17, Gwen has always strived to help the Filipino youth become better decision makers and creative thinkers. As an executive board member of the Arches Consulting Group and DLSU Freshman Engineering Government, she worked to institutionalize innovative thinking practices across both organizations. She credits her own growth and leadership to witnessing how community is lived out in Effective Altruism PH, UX Plus, and the Bumpy Career, where she has served in various capacities. Today, she spends her days learning how to learn and figuring out how to thrive as a late diagnosed ADHD'er. She also tinkers with industrial engineering projects, carrying strong interest in systems engineering and human factors and ergonomics. Wow, give it up for Gwen, virtual applause. And our other lovely personality tonight is Camille Puentespina. She is the current president of User Experience Society. She believes that community-driven, honest, and sustainable design is the ultimate goal, coming from humble beginnings herself. As a generalist, Cams has worn multiple hats in project management, product design, and business development for local and international clients. Above the work, though, she loves to channel her energy in mentoring and learning from young minds in her student-grown UX community. To clear her mind, she likes to play crossword, do yoga, and cook. Give it up for Cams. Yay! So thank you all for being here tonight. As the moderator of this, I just want to give context and why I want to invite these people to even talk about why that this topic in the first place, because I feel like lalo na yung pandemic, student like communities is just a vital part of youth culture, especially in the Philippines. Like when you're in college, like being part of those communities is essential. And I felt it like so weird that it wasn't like that in other countries. It just shows like how vital it is. And yeah, it was even more pronounced during the pandemic where like, you didn't have the physical space to meet with other people. So all you could do is like meet in online third places. But I found it like despite this like being so vital to our lives, no one was really talking about like how to build these right or what even got into like building them anyways. It just felt like people wanted to start like orgs or communities like left and right without any intention behind them, which is why I want to like bring in people who have experience with like community building for like how many years now, and like talk about these kinds of important questions so that you can share it with like other people too and aspiring community builders. Yes, are you guys ready to start?
Woo, let's go.
Yay! Okay, so our first question. Let's first like define what even is a community. Can you guys define this in the context of your like years of org experience and why you gravitate toward this term more than the term organization? Cams, maybe you can go first.
Okay, yeah, definitely. So thank you for that question, Bianca. Even I myself, I feel like I haven't really, explored the whole difference in definition between the two. And let me just say, I really want to trudge on this question carefully because the last thing that I want is to cause somewhat of a misconception or of elitism or something like that between the two terms, right? Because a lot of these would be a personal sentiment for me, and I really don't think that one trumps the other. Personally, I consider both organization and the word organization community as something that is somewhat interchangeable, but and we can't really say that just because an org doesn't really use the term or doesn't really understand the term that they aren't designing good communities, right? But yeah, so moving to the question and how I actually, the reason why I gravitate towards the term community now comes from two particular reasons. And I actually listed it here. So the first one, I remember the first time I actually realized that I was shifting to using this term was when I had a class. I think that was in social sciences. Yeah, and our main reading that time, and it was I think I was a second year that time. The main reading was Benedict Anderson's Imagined Communities. I don't know if you guys know that that reading, but basically, if I could summarize his whole perspective in a sentence, how badly I could explain it, is that he says that imagined communities hold a sense of affinity, even with people that they do not know, they haven't met at all, right? Because one, it is limited. So in a way, limited means like how, right, us UX designers would create sometimes kind of like a boundary, a ridiculous boundary, between other disciplines of design to, and sovereign. But sovereign, I would say, is something that orgs do have too. But anyway, this term really stuck to me, and I unconsciously leaned towards this term, because it felt more active, right? To commune than to organize, because organize feels like you're just basically having people organize in one, like over communing. But the second reason, though, and this is the one that is more personal and more of a self realization within the organization, is something that also something I came to realize over my second year too. So in my organization, oh, I mean, like, in my community and organization. See, I interchanged between the two, right? But yeah, um, in UX society, right? Before this whole pandemic blew up, after every single event, whether it was a big event or like a big flagship event or even a small one, we would always go and get lunch or dinner or coffee together. And we basically, it would basically take hours just talking about new trends in design, new people in design, new gossips in the industry if there were. And it all felt really, really natural, whether whoever it would be with. Um, and I had my fair share of organizations. I think in my first year, I had like 8 organizations I was joining part of. Um, but it was different with UXOC, right? With the org that I'm with now. Um, there was some kind of bond that even if I was a beginner in UX design, I really resonated with a lot of the sentiments that they had. And it came to realization for me now that it was definitely a community, right? Because for me, between an organization and a community, the way I perceive it is the latter can hold a conversation over lunch or dinner or coffee to something that they're collectively passionate about. You don't go for it. You don't go for this like you're this event just for extra credits or for connections, right? You go for it for the affinity with these people, which is fostered by that group, by the things that that community does. Um, and what's amazing is in a community, that lunch or that dinner or coffee, you don't necessarily need to be immediately familiar with the people that are in there, right? Sometimes you just like bring in a really random person who also is part of that community, and you immediately have some kind of sense of bond, and you basically grow and build that shared interest. So I think that's really what communities entail, to be able to, to be able to build that sense of affinity and that recognition of that group, of that like un- similar understanding. So yeah, I think my basis of looking to foster a community is basically to help invite people to look forward to bonding over food or coffee, or anything within that space. I think that's really where imagined communities lie, right? And it could be as simple as that when looking at the metaphorical sense. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that thoughtful answer. I remember in my freshie year, I was so newbie to UX Lakpa, but like moments when like you took me and like Sinarafa out after the workshop to Tetsuo, I really appreciate like the little moments like that. It made me feel more welcome despite still being new. How about you, Gwen?
Yeah, I mean, I actually also got to reminisce because, yeah, I was 6 months into my freshman year when this whole thing happened. And so, really, very limited time to actually go out with org mates. But at least for my high school org, like, yeah, I did have those moments. It was an external org and it was just crazy. It made me so hyped up for college, really, just the conversations that you have after projects. But yeah, I think kind of similar in that I don't really have anything against organizations, but I feel like an organization can evolve into feeling like a community, right? But also you can have a community outside of an organization setting. So I'm speaking from the first case, in which, when does an org become a community and when is it not so much? And I think like there are four things that I've kind of grown into. I'll explain each, but I'll just enumerate them. So first is a very like highly contextualized definition of growth that really sets like what the org does and what they aim for different from just like um copying some template. Another would have to be like collective responsibility and proactiveness. And third is like accelerated growth despite operating at a deficit. And the fourth, which is also my favorite, is just the persistence of these social relationships. So for the first one, I think that taking one of my organizations, which was the Archers Consulting Group. If you're from Ateneo or UP, you also have sort of a consulting organization there. But I guess what makes us like different is that we're relatively younger. When I came in doing human resources, it was only our second full year of operations. And then another, I guess, difference from those other school cultures is I guess, how familiar students are with the consulting industry and then also competitions, which is not the only entry path, but a good like practice for a lot of students. And so with that, not only were we differing from like the existing, I guess, templates of what a consulting org should look like, we were also, I guess, different from the other school orgs. So it's not like in the advo culture where there's already a lot of like training orgs that actually drill in on a specific skill. And what this meant for us is that besides meeting like the traditional metrics required by like our the governing body for orgs in our school, usually centered on like how much you submit requirements on time and just all those like events, kind of high number of membership and all. We also had like our own metrics, which was how well can we prepare our students for the consulting field. And so with that, I think when we have, or the leaders like really have an understanding of that and how we can actually contextualize things from all these other places and apply them, then that's usually what I guess allows the community to be sustainable. But also there's that collective responsibility and proactiveness. Like I think you really feel it when people do things out of obligation versus when they're radiating their light. Like they're just being themselves and bringing what they already have into it. So it's not so much forced. And I think I experienced this in effective altruism. So it's really a community of people who use reason and logic to do the most good. And I guess just in the icebreakers, for example, I'm able to talk to people who are very concerned about animal welfare, specifically the sentience of fishes and chickens that we don't normally like think about. Or we have other people working more on like the social sciences, or someone actually who has done research for the government. So coming into that, and it becomes more of like a culture add than a culture fit. And I don't know, I feel like that's what keeps things exciting for everyone and really takes us in directions that we didn't realize. And the third is being able to have accelerated growth despite operating at a deficit. So I think a lot of communities emerge because there's no like existing organization or even like a group that can actually cater to that certain interest of yours or that certain goal of yours. And so with that, just because of the natural proactiveness of people, just because of the understanding that you have for your strategy, which were the first two, then you're really able to, I guess, operate and accelerate growth despite having no like conventional driving force. And I guess a good example would have to be in the student government. So at least in DLSU, like every college, so engineering college, is divided into batches, and they sort of make like a student government out of that, like an entire org, despite in contrast to having it under like the home org. So really starting from scratch. And I guess for the student government, there was really like, we're all freshmen. Not everyone has project experience and then having to comply with like heavy paperwork for project approval. So we started this like project management training, which essentially applied like cognitive science and engineering principles into like leadership. And so in that way, I think we were able, I think despite like 8 out of 12 of our graduates not really having project heading experience in DLSU, we were still able to execute like a good number of projects. And I think like having to optimize for that, having to do something differently for that is something we have to recognize in communities because, again, we're facing challenges that other people may not have had. And so we still have to operate despite those deficits. But I think what that those all really lead to would have to be the persistence of social relationships. So, like what Camille said earlier, when you come in, you don't really know everyone, and sometimes you don't really share like the same ideas or beliefs, but it's really because of those interactions that you're able to find common ground. And I say persistence because they really don't end like after the school year, after the event. Like even until the day when you kind of look back and be like, oh, I met this person 4 years ago, but I still talk to them today, or maybe they're even my colleague already, and they kind of supported my post on LinkedIn. It's really those things which I think as a community we should aim for. And having that quality of relationships at whatever scale your community has currently grown. So yeah, those four things are I think why I things that I look for in orgs, hoping that they would kind of be a community that I would also enjoy growing and contributing to.
Thank you also for the thoughtful answer. And yeah, I definitely agree. Like that proactiveness and passion, like it's just something like anyone intuitively knows. And it's so, you're right, it's so infectious. Like you can just tell people I will literally like breathe UX, live and breathe UX or live and breathe EA because they will are willing to talk about it for hours with you. And I just love that kind of energy. I wish you could bring it to all our endeavors. So yeah, that's the kind of culture I associate with a community. That's how I personally differentiate it. Thank you for your lovely examples. So my next question. So community leaders are pretty much generalists, and it's hard to define what exactly they do. As current or former leaders of these communities, can you tell me exactly like what were your responsibilities? What did you do to in community building? How about you, Cam, since you're the current president right now? I'd love to hear this.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Where do I start? Well, I guess before anything else, I'll just emphasize that I don't recognize myself as a community designer yet, right? Community leader, yeah, definitely. And I'm definitely very much inclined to building community culture and structure, right? But I guess to better give a grasp on what I do as a president and how I basically help build right the community design. So in UX SOC, we call the whole executive board or basically the people who kind of um, arrange the starting point of the whole year or the whole SEM. We call them the mafia. So right. The mafia is basically comprised of several people. Now, every department that we have, which has been growing ever since 5 years ago when we really started it, um, is that it's led by a vice president. That is really the one that's intentfully responsible, leading the direction of all the different of all of their own departments, initiatives, goals, and even the people. Now, so the one that actually overlooks the one that basically reviews the performance and definitely the welfare of these vice presidents are the top three. So the top three comprises of the president, the vice president, and the sec gen. So when you said generalist, I'd say that's an understatement, especially for what we do as part of the top three. And yes, it's definitely really, really hard to define the work. Not because we don't necessarily do things right, but because there's a lot of interchangeability and a lot of in betweens within the responsibility that we can't really pinpoint one specific thing that we are focused on, right? So I'd say a couple of things that we are. So first, we're actually messengers in the way that we have to really be able to connect everyone within the organization, within the community, not just internally, not just between different departments or between right like a VP to a member, but even like outside, even the external. So that's really in being able to really being able to provide all the sentiments of our constituents to the people that actually need it, like say Lions or the League of Independent Organizations, which is basically the one that collects all the independent organizations in Ateneo. That's one thing. So being a messenger is one thing that not just me as a president do, but even like the EVP, right? And the SecGen do. But yeah, another one I would say is really being the guidance counselor of things. You really have to be able to, understand the sentiments of the people that you work with, the community members, everyone that is involved in the whole process. Not just as a person who is above and really just providing all the advice, all the information to them, but actually being able to understand that, to adapt and to learn from that too, so that you yourself, you're also growing the process, right? And that leads me to the third responsibility that I think is really one that's the least glorious, I would say, but something that's really, really important is being the janitor of things. Yes, I really call it the janitor because a lot of the dirty work, a lot of the cleaning up of things that you might have missed, of all the things that you could have done better from the year before, or all the processes that needs reinventing, is something that you have to be on top of, right? You have to understand all these, you have to be familiar, and you have to sweep it. You have to be the one to face all that and sweep it for all your constituents. But I guess the last one is really being both the builder and the demolisher. We say that, right? I feel like the way that I see a lot of the community designing, right, is more on building structures, really, being an architect, right? Really building and designing and documenting better experiences. But most times, honestly, and I realize this, you also have to be a demolisher. You need to evaluate and reevaluate and constantly be critical with all the current practices that you have, see which are still relevant to your community, and if not, point it out, put it in the archive, build something better, build something right that is actually relevant to your community. So those are just a couple of responsibilities that I would say that I experience now as a president, and something that I still do even when I was an executive vice president the year before. I was still able to adapt it, and it's really something that I think encapsulates the whole generalist generalist view. But yeah, I think that's about it for me.
First, can I just say I love all like the different like metaphors you use: janitor, architect, builder, and you're so true. Like there's so much unspoken labor. This it's not like a glamorous position at all, to be honest. Like for instance, kahit my VP for HR, you're still going to do HR work in the sense like there's so much emotional labor, like trying to connect everyone. But the things you do for a community, right? How about you, Gwen? Can you relate
Yeah,
somewhat?
I mean, I think like it's a really good. I mean, have those icons or at least those personas that you mentioned in your head, because I think you'll find a lot of like overlaps also in my answers. But at least what Bianca said about HR, especially during a pandemic, I don't know how you guys do it still, but it's really a challenge. But yeah, I guess like for my responsibilities that I have had, it's also four, and I'll go over it. So first is contextualizing best practices from other places. Then the second is actually thinking through like a strategy. Then next is making hard decisions, right? Thinking in probabilities instead of like black and white thinking. And then finally is radiating your light. Okay, so at least for the first one, I do believe that you don't want to go in an org, or sorry, I keep saying org, but at least for a community, at least if you're just going into an org, it's expected for you that, okay, I go in and I leave, and then that's it. It just goes on the way that it has always gone on. But when you're entering and you're very intent on growing this community that you're in, you want to make sure that you leave it much better. You leave it maybe in a different direction, but still better than it was before. And you don't really have to have all of like so much technical skills to go with, or even experience, because I think sometimes having too much background experience in the traditional companies can actually come in the way of like building a community, right? But yeah, you really just have to look at how things, or rather look at what you already have and find out how you can apply it in this certain field. So let's say there's a thread on Twitter that I saw about how all of these different inventions were actually created first in a different setting, like chemistry, people finding out about, oh, this is a sticky note because this certain glue they were trying to make didn't work. And but you can also look at things like other schools or other social media platforms, other countries, and then adapt it to where you currently are. So just that wide understanding of the things that are being done in the world, like it can actually set you apart when you're building this community. Because then you have this toolkit already. Your toolkit is not just the existing things, but you actually have best practices from other places. And I think and the next one would be a strategy. So as I said earlier, like one of the challenges we had in the consulting org is that there's so many goals. Like sure, you want to take people to consultancies like McKinsey and Bain and all, but then there's also this like milestone which most people have, which is to win in case competitions. And so I think having the team understand that, we can't aim for both and be super good at it. You have to like frame it as, oh, the skills that we actually gain in these case competitions are going to help towards that long-term goal, but that's not the only thing, or that's not the only way for people to develop them. Like that's like really part of strategy, because you can distinguish it from just the tactics that you do and find a deeper meaning in them. And it's really up to the manager. Like everyone is not going to be aligned on this, and it's, I guess, as a community builder, I've had to actually facilitate that discussion and make sure that everybody comes to terms with it. Because once everyone works asynchronously, then you don't want to be having to oversee that and micromanage still, right? At the very start, just having everyone aligned. And another thing that really helped was having like a customer journey map. So this is something that you've heard in marketing. And it really starts with awareness, then consideration, conversion or purchasing, and also advocacy. And in our case, the conversion or the purchasing would have to be like being hired by a consulting firm. But still, the problem wasn't really on that aspect. Like we can host as many career talks as we wanted or invite all sorts of people from those companies. But we realized that in our context, awareness itself about the field was still low. The field, as well as the ways in which people develop it, like competitions and case interviews, since a lot of time people are really focused on how they are being assessed or learned in the traditional classroom. So with that, there's really that recognition as a community builder that we can't do everything within the time that we have, but we can like make sure that we're on that trajectory. Okay, so next would have to be, like as I said, making hard decisions, because a lot of times you want to be consultative and you're really going to talk to people, but you can't, like, as a highly sensitive person, like you tend to take it all in and you want to accommodate every single person's needs. But at least something from UX also is that what people say that they want is not always going to be the same as what they actually do. And so if you're going to kind of be very make yourself 100% dependent on being attending to the needs of everybody, then that's going to confuse you even more, right? Because you have this list of data of what people say they want or what they don't even say that they want versus what they do. So I think a very helpful tool for me in trying to please everyone is to really think in probabilities. And so knowing that, just because somebody said they don't like this decision doesn't mean it's going to be entirely bad. You're going to have to weigh each option against certain criteria and not and allow that you to find, like, I guess, try to find the most optimal choice. As an engineering student, like it's I don't want to go into that too much, because I think community isn't all about the numbers, but at least in your head, you're going to have to stick you're going to have to decide on things that people don't agree with, and then you also have to just have the integrity and the conviction to still trust in that decision of yours. And then finally is to radiate your light. I think it's so easy for us to dim who we are when we are in a certain environment that kind of warrants a certain behavior. And as much as it's important to listen and to adapt, you should also believe in yourself as like the culture ad. So there's a really nice tweet I like, which is by Arlen. So Arlen I don't know her surname on Twitter, but she's invested by Mark Cuban, and he actually mentioned her besides Warren Buffett and Ray Dalio as like the three people that he listens to, which obviously those two other people are very influential, and so you're kind of wondering like, who is she and why would he say that? But what he said is that you're in rooms that I'll never be in. She supports Black founders and just marginalized founders. And so that was a statement that he believed because he saw kind of the background and just the relationship she had with these people, and in that course, being able to empathize with them. So yeah, with that, like just just shine your light and know who you are is also what you're going to be able to bring to the community. Yeah.
So inspiring. Thank you so much, especially that last part, because I don't know, I feel like when you're a leader, the pressure of like, oh, everyone looks up to you, everyone like turns to you. It's so easy to like just like conform to like those expectations and stuff. But it only does people a disservice, right? Like people chose you as leader for a reason. Like you are a leader for a reason. And thank you for sharing the tweet. Yes, yes. And yeah, I feel like leading while like being yourself, it's just so brave to do. Yeah, yeah. And thank you for sharing about like all your different approaches to like whether about the probabilities thing or like talking with people. All of those efforts like they revolve around coordination and collaboration somehow. So it's really interesting to learn about like how you all approach it differently. So that actually brings me to my third question. What does a healthy community look like to you all? What signs do you think need to be present? Because I know it's something that's intuitive, but I feel like it needs to be more explicitly articulated, right? Because it's hard to sometimes to say like, despite you loving like a community so much, you can tell it's bad for you. Yeah. What do you have to say, Cams?
Yeah, well, I think you actually already mentioned one point that I actually really thought about now. It is in a way intuitive, if you think about the healthy community. But yeah, let me try to explain it better in the way that I actually see it in my org. So I'll cover this in the context of student organizations specifically, right? So I think that a lot of the common org perception of a healthy community is really, well, it's intuitive, it's the regular. That's one of it is having good communication between members, having successful events with really good KPIs, even regularly volunteering on the side, and having a lack of toxicity within the relationships interdepartmentally, and a continuous growth. Well, definitely before, I remember that that was really something that we were tracking, a continuous growth in the quantity and the quality of members. And I agree, I mean, these things are really great signs that an organization is doing well. And the name and the reputation of the org is really at a great state. But the caveat of just looking at this way, and something that I realized just, well, this fourth the year that I was placed into presidency, um was that when we try to look and only look at it in that sense or in that way, which is more or less very external pressure, um and we begin to isolate that community, right? And we begin to put so much pressure in achieving what others deem to be a successful thing as an org, right? As an or as a way that they perceive an org. So I think, well, now that I've been in this place, and something that I have been reflecting by myself is that I think that a healthy community, to an extent, and especially within ones that are already kind of an established orgs, is that it should be open enough to feel, I mean, it should be open enough that members feel comfortable enough in criticizing and contributing and stabilizing the current practices. It's not just something that the people, I mean, in our case, the mafia is, like, deciding, talking about, right? or not just the top three picking what should be and what shouldn't. Sometimes even, and one thing that we've been doing regularly is that we need to squeeze it out from people. We need to practice looking at nonverbal cues and recognizing those discrepancies. Like Gwen said a while ago, right? Sometimes they don't even say it right in your face, but they experience it, they feel it. Even with a lot of the articles that I've been reading about community design, people don't really recognize what's wrong in a community until it's actually really being right, until they really realize that they dig in deep. And that's really something that I feel like is necessary when you're building a healthy community. You have to go through that first before you actually establish, because only then can you actually get the, well, less glorified but realer truth to what they're actually feeling, what they're actually experiencing. um and that's where you actually get the real pain points, right? If you were to put it in a community design talaga, that's where you start really focusing designing on how might we, right? That's where you really get the how might we actually improve the experience of all the members, how might we develop a culture given this, given that, given all these criticisms, given all these needs of our members. And I'd say we're not yet there. We do have a lot of growing still. I feel like before we were so geared to just, to just like push everyone to really get the best results in everything that we're doing. But really listening to the members now, it's really more of understanding what the members need and having your own indicators of what really is growth for your people, not just for the org but the people themselves. So yeah, I think that's mainly it. That's really understanding your own definition of a healthy community and standing by it.
Well, I just thank you. And I just like to share this comment from one of our audience members, Chloe. I agree. I used to think that community building should seem like common sense. But I realized that it's really different to put intention talaga in community building. Yeah, that's so true. I think it's because maybe it's not for everyone, like just empathizing with people and being compassionate. It's not natural or intuitive for everyone. And that was like really like hard for me to realize. Yeah, that's why it's important to like have like activities or like training. I don't want to call it training for it, like on being a decent person, or at least understanding people more, like what they're speaking, like not just like what they say but in their body language too, because like communication is so important, especially online. How about you, Gwen?
Gosh, you know how like when you start thinking or really believing in something, you start attracting people who think the same way. I feel it's the same as here because yeah, I've been really working on like communicating my needs to like friends, and that's exactly what Camille said, but on a more like on a community level. So yeah, and at least for me, I also just have one point, and it's mindful give and take on an individual level. So I think that's what a healthy community looks like. And I guess just from my experiences, it's mostly the opposite. And so when I say give and take, it's really about like adjusting for others, but also like, knowing what to adjust for and then also them doing the same. But it's mindful because you want to make sure that like you are doing so within some boundaries that you set for yourself versus just kind of getting pulled from side to side and like not really feeling that you're individually healthy anymore. But at least for me, like I had a certain issue with myself in that because I have like ADHD, we have a thing called rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Typical small like forms of rejection would scientifically hurt a lot more for us. And so in order to like kind of reduce my own stress, right, I kind of asked the group chats if like, oh, if you're not ready to respond to the chat, is it okay if you just like don't click on it? Or I also taught them like this messenger function. If you guys didn't know, you can long press a message on Messenger. They kind of give you a preview of the latest or the earliest unread message. But yeah, so I did communicate that a lot of times to group chats of like varying sizes, around like 3 people all the way until like 7 or 8. And dude, like none of them followed it, which I feel like is so sad because like at least for me, coming into an org and kind of being a shy person, like it's already very difficult. And especially that it was really hard that I had to prematurely reveal like my diagnosis. I guess it really goes like it's something that human resources should regulate. But since I'm in HR or I'm leading HR, it was also something I couldn't even get from other people. So when I say mindful give and take, it's something that the leaders themselves should champion, and it really will trickle down onto like the other people, because if they see that even certain leaders are acting that way, then it really doesn't give others an incentive to change or to go against that culture. So I did understand, naman, that some people are really shy, or like for them, they really don't like just leaving the group chat unread. They like knowing what's going on, even if they're pretty silent. And so I also did offer the option of just reacting. Thumbs up, no need for heart. But yeah, so I think when there's no mindful give and take, even let's say with certain tasks, like if somebody's sick and they don't feel safe enough to communicate that to the person like leading them, then that really breeds unhealthiness, and then it kind of again trickles onto other parts of the org.
OMG, I feel so seen. Thank you for talking about this. Like, I am a sensitive person also, and I found that like only by like defining clear ways to like respond, like, oh, if you read this, react with this certain emoji. Because sometimes there are times when people just like randomly react about reading the whole thing. I know, I've been there. You can also reach out to me, so on and so forth. I don't know, I just felt like I was like doing all this extra again, like
Yeah, you can
labor.
respond over
So,
DM.
yeah, like I was making it harder for myself just to make these people's lives easier. And that like it really sucked because even though I would always get advice like just toughen up. That's the way like people are. That's how life is. I don't know, it's just so hard, especially when like that kind of sensitivity is so like vital and integral to
And I think
you.
like one or it's unrelated, but sometimes the reason you go into the community is that the ones who were there earlier, like the older members, they didn't act that way, and so that's why you were like really excited. But yeah, also recognizing the fleeting people that you're going to be with in a community, and being ready for those changes to occur. I guess if you're neurodivergent, it's something that can help you weather through it or decide to like leave it eventually.
Yeah, they say the only thing constant is change. It's so hard to like, Cam, when you leave next year, I'm gonna be so set up.
No, I can't even imagine that yet. I'm in denial.
Oh, okay. You're not. I do not see it. I cannot see it. Okay, next question. Um, Last, can you guys talk about like the systems and processes you implemented in your communities in order to ensure this healthy culture? So you guys talked about some of this now in your previous answers, but I'd love to hear like more on this, nerdy system stuff. Because again, like this is what this fireside chat is for, to talk about things that aren't often talked about. Yeah.
Right, okay. So I presume I'm going first. Yeah. So, well, one thing that we always worry about every year of planning is right, every sem we do hold like a plan sem, so we really strategize our whole plans to see if we're all aligned with all the. You guys are able to see that. Yes, but that's really something that we regularly do. Actually, we're just about to have our plan sem also. So it's really a time of planning and really setting everything up just to make sure that not just like all the plans, like all the initiatives are aligned, but even the members themselves are also aligned. Within those plan sems, we do a lot of leadership training also. We try to open them up with each other and with themselves. So, diba? As I said earlier, we're like guidance counselors in a way. Yes. um, but yeah, definitely the plan Sam really helps us align with each other and really understand where each other is coming from. And usually with those plan SAMs, we set a specific goal for that year. So we often call it like a theme that we really stand by. Say, I think in my second year we called it experience better. So the whole theme of the year was really making sure and delivering everything that would help to like communicate what it means to experience better, to have experiences that are better, right? Um, and by doing so, we're able to form in a way an idea of how we can make sure that our incumbent members continue to grow while the new members that are incoming, so like the first year, so the people who just started learning UX will also continue to learn. With that, we are in a way arranged and I mean aligned with each other, even if we know that each one comes from a different background, from a different need, and from a different goal, right? So that's one thing that is more general that we do. But I think in terms of something that is more in depth and more specific to the organization is a mindset that I basically we basically have in top three. It's that if we can't or we don't want to do it, why should they or why should we force them to do this, right? So we really stand by our moratoriums and Sunday breaks. We really make sure that everyone is aligned in that and that we're really serious with our kind of burnout strategy. I mean no burnout strategy, right? We try to make sure that people do it because they're passionate about it, not because well they were forced or it's their role. They just really have to do it, right? In a sense, of course, there is accountability that we're trying to practice also and that we're trying to manage with the people. But more or less, it's more about being, again, coming back to what I said earlier, it's more about understanding and realizing what their needs are before we actually build the process. So a lot of the times, our CIP, or Code of Internal Procedure, we always arrange it, rearrange it, reevaluate it every SEM, every year, so that we know that we are still all aligned and it's something that that specific leader would need or that specific leader resonates with, because that's the least we'd want, where a lot of the processes, okay, they're transferred from one school year to another, from one vice president to another, but then later on in the process you realize that they don't really necessarily work effectively with that CIP, right? They don't really, it's not the best for them. So really getting insights all the time with what, like basically just listening, just the same way as how you listen with your body. It's like in a bigger sense, you're listening with the body of your community, right? And by being able to do so, you actually really create a culture that's your own, not just something that you deem to be healthy for a general sense of an organization. So yeah.
Thank you. Always like so much good answers from both of you guys. How about you, Gwen?
But yeah, I mean, the thing she said about if you don't want to do it, why are you going to make others do it? I feel the same way. Sometimes I do something because I'm like, oh, I have to set a good example. But yeah, I think most organizations, they do have like individual consultations or like every just plan SEMs where they set objectives and within those objectives, like OKRs. But yeah, actually, we don't really have that in DLSU. Something I just did because I saw my admin friends doing it. And yeah, Cam's article also helped. But I guess two systems that I found most valuable. First is designing your own leadership training, but also integrating your core competency, especially for really young organizations where the actual skill you're trying to develop is not really established in the newer members, because like that's why they joined, because they want to learn about it. And when I say members, by the way, I guess like I could rephrase it as officers, because I did find that a lot of the officers that I had, like they were really young, they're first time members, right? And also very far in age from the actual people who started the org like 2 years ago. And the second point would have to actually be involving your officers in higher level strategy planning. So I'll just share how we did it, what we actually discovered. So the first one is, just to give an example, I think a lot of the officers, kasi they come in with more operational roles, like in our school, there's an entire department just to process like operations. Like when you say operations, they're not actually organizing the event. They're just doing all of the paperwork. Joaquin is from, rather Rafael is from DLSU. He knows that it's way, I guess the paperwork is way more challenging than in other schools, at least in UP and Ateneo. Like, not that I'm saying it's not hard, it's just that they require so much more. So with that, it's very easy to get caught up in these outside kind of metrics that we have to comply with. And then most of the time isn't spent anymore actually on the core competency. So one way is in like the leadership training that we made, we had like people go out into rooms and they got to know each other with a facilitator. But then at least for the challenge, we kind of made them solve an org problem, but like in a case competition format. And yeah, in that sense, a lot of people hadn't even joined cases. So it really gave them like insight into how to do it with people from different colleges. And another example would have to be for our, like, I guess junior officers, which is really common in DLSU. That's where you train people and then they go into different departments. So I made like an asynchronous lightning jam workshop for them, which a lightning jam workshop usually starts with kind of like a lot of sticky notes and them laying out their ideas individually, then kind of seeing what are the common like kind of themes in people's answers, building upon each other. So it's really like allowing people to do it on a paper or sticky notes so that for even those who are really shy can have a chance to contribute. And then I also added before that like a module about like the difference of focused and diffuse mode of thinking, convergent versus divergent thinking, right? So that, and then also like an opposite thinking exercise. So really that entire module, we had 3 teams do it asynchronously, and then their output was like a mental health project, which like they implemented for the org. It's kind of like outsourcing my job, but then also like allowing them to still get those key skills as you were complying with any of the operational kind of things going on. Then yeah, the next one is involving members in strategy planning. So what I found was that when members like get the projects, they aren't always sure of why they are doing it or how it ties into the bigger picture. And I guess saying it's helpful, like, oh, this one helps us like teach people all about this. But then it's really different, I think, when you're able to do it with them. Now, Bianca, she did a really good community building kind of study a couple of months or years ago. It's on her website. You can check the full case study. But then also, you might not have time for that. So think about that. Your officers are also members. And if you do it with them all at once, you kind of hit 2 birds in one stone. So we did just a little, I guess the prompt that I had was like, how might we best prepare members for to enter the consulting field? And they had all of these answers. So what I did was like we grouped them and then we tried to see which are the ones which we're responsible for rather in HR, because we do handle member engagement and training and development, and which are better for other departments. Like maybe this one is best handled by publicities, they can do a campaign on this. Maybe the other is best handled by XREL because they can actually do a competition for it, or another kind of training for it with an outside group. So in that sense, like they got to see like which projects we're best at and which we can do. But then it was also a chance for them, to be creative because they got to decorate their sticky notes and throw in ideas. Another way naman, another case was actually performed with Ateneo Code. We attended like their this program that they had called Exchange, where they help and guide organizations through some organizational development practices. The challenge that the student government had was, here we are trying to empower our batch, trying to be leaders for our batch, but most of the students were also just new to this whole college thing. And so they didn't really have like the confidence, but some of them also the capability they felt in order to actually help our batch traverse through our freshman year. So we did this program, not just the EB, but we actually had some officers join us. And so what we found was that in order for us to help our batch, we needed to think from the inside out, right? The big picture is 800 people, but even within our student government of 70 people, right? You can put an even smaller circle of really drilling in and developing a few core leaders so that then it kind of extends outward. But seems so intuitive, right? If we had just told them that. But then because like they got to go through the whole process of it and really realize that in order to help our batch become engineering leaders, we needed to make ourselves leaders first and feel like a leader and also have the tools to be a leader. Then yeah, like we needed to do all of these action plans. So yeah, the first one again is really integrating your core competency in your leadership trainings. But then the second would have to be involving your officers and your members in your strategic planning.
Yes, thank you so much for that thoughtful answer. That caps off all the questions I have for today's panel. I'll now open the floor for Q&A. So to our audience, feel free to like just chat in Zoom or even like unmute if you have any questions for our speakers. Then they will happily answer.
I'm trying to find Bianca's case study. I'm going to send it as well.
Thank you for the support. Wait, while we are waiting for questions, I'm gonna think of one. Can you guys talk about like one pivotal moment? Can be like really bad or like really good, like moment in your like I guess leader like experiences when you realize na oh like I really meant like you na community building was for you talaga. Anyone wants to go? Yeah? Yes.
I thought Gwen was gonna I thought Gwen was gonna talk. But yeah, I can start. Um this one I think is, well, at the top of my head, it's something that just really recently came in. Well, I was already inclined with community building. But it just made me re-realize it again, how much I love community building and how important it is for me. Um so yeah, this thing happened like around late last year. Not gonna disclose na lang anything. But it was really a lot of more or less janitorial work with a project that kind of had a lot of issues, mainly because of like lack of documentation, especially on the development side. And at the same time, like pretty much really just, I don't know, like miscommunication between a lot of the members from the incumbent and the previous one, right? So definitely, because there was a client involved, it was really something that our consultancy side had kind of a difficulty with, in terms of like communicating, mainly because it was the first time that they actually really interacted with that client, which was a client from the past. um but so they asked for my help to intervene. So this is where the janitorial work type of thing came in, right? And at that time, it was really more of just really trying to get it done, trying to get the work finished, just making sure that everything gets fixed and everything gets organized. So it was more of my project management side coming in, kicking in to really help. But then just recently, right, we were holding ICs with our members, with especially with the VPs, and we were trying to understand how how their experience was in the first sem, what could have been better, what they needed assistance with, right? And that was where I really felt like even like these small ICs were so important, because I feel like without those, it was really difficult to get in touch and get them to open up these things. But one of the people who were involved in that process really felt so guilty for not having had more work done, when in fact it wasn't even theirs to, I mean, it wasn't really them required to have to clean it up, right? And getting those insights from them and being able to give that reassurance by then, it was really something that they super appreciated. It was something that really changed the course of how they perceive their second sem to be, and how they want their second sem to pan out, how they want to lead the second sem. So the moments like those, really, I don't know, it gives me goosebumps to think that you're really touching people with the way that you build communities, with the way that you design your community, with the way that you're involved with your own community. So I'm not saying like it has to go to that level, right? It has to reach an issue like that to get them to realize these things and to really get them to open up. But you never know, right? You never know if those people who are really jolly in your community actually has certain sentiments like that they can just really easily open up. But that's a part of your job to really get that, to really extract that, and to really understand and improve their experience so that they can do better as themselves, as they want it to be, and has how like so that they can show their full potential, not being hindered by those things that might have been caused by misunderstandings and difficulties and culture that you didn't even realize was there. So yeah, that's I think that's a mirror me.
Yes, thank you for sharing that with us. And how about you, Gwen? Also, you can ask your question, Gwen,
Yeah, I'll
after.
ask it after, no worries. But yeah, actually the experience I thought of is also IC related. And what I find, okay, as a community leader, you'll find that you have a lot of power to institutionalize things. And usually, okay, even if some people want to do so, they just feel like they don't have like the authority to. So something like an IC, you can be telling like your members like, yeah, feel free to approach us if you want to talk to us. But most of the time they really wouldn't, because like, yeah, they're gonna feel like it's a work call. And so just having you as a leader kind of, or even if you open the call for it, like you say, yeah, feel free to book us and all, like it's a lot easier for them to, or to ease them into it if you actually message them personally. And for me, I've experienced both sides. So in, at least in my school, it's not really very common to have these one-on-ones, which, yeah, if you've done internships, right, there's something that you may be doing weekly with your boss. But yeah, it's like, I guess the vibe is like they actually get really scared, and so I'm having to reassure them that it's okay. Versus in at least effective altruism, since it's, I guess, connected with the outside, it's really something that we do because we find each person to be so interesting, and we just really want to explore who they are. I was able to do ICs then when we actually established a chapter in my school, and I was really just, it really excited me because it's very hard for me to be very interested in people from the surface level. And there was this guy that I talked to, like he shared exactly the same love for learning, the same curiosity about the differences in how people learn, and even just missing the campus. Those were things that I've always met him, but then I never really knew those things about him. And so from being somebody who felt like, oh, community building is not for me, I'm not likely to do it, I actually realized that it is a pretty worth it thing, because they say things like, oh, nobody has ever done this with me before. And I guess like it's not just really tapping into how people like talking about themselves. It's also how they're able to make that connection with you and find common ground, which you may not have done in another place. Yeah, so that's, I guess, Cam's talked a lot about work, right? About how sometimes there are things that are left unsaid and you don't realize those kind of inner conflict happening. But this one, especially in a pandemic, is really, I guess, the bare minimum for you to do, and as a leader, which doesn't really take up much of your time, but may also be a challenge if it's not something that you're used to.
Yes, thank you for sharing. And I'm gonna send here in the chat too, but the power of ICs, I believe, is so understated. Like, and what was your question? Yes.
Okay, yeah. So my question, since community obviously involves being with the community, how do you manage your social battery?
Interesting. Well, I think for one, being an extrovert in a time of pandemic is actually a remedy. Like the organization is a remedy for my social battery and being able to, just get in touch with people here. But definitely I'm trying to like understand it in a perspective of, like a not an extreme extrovert like me. Well, I think, well, for one, we do really hold, and I think that's something that I've also gotten insights from, like even introverts in the team, right? How important moratoriums and how important their own time should be respected. We really try to make it a point, same as how you mentioned it, Gwen, right? When we say that you don't like we try not to really force or give any impression of pressure for them to immediately get or reply to messages, especially if it's out of work hours or especially if it's something that's in the weekend, or if it's family time. So that's one thing that we really try to make sure that we apply not just for introverts but also for extroverts, for any people in our community. Um, just making sure that everyone really understands that this is supposed to be a place of you growing for your passion, for your needs, not for you being forced upon doing things that aren't necessarily, or communicating with people that you don't necessarily need to or want to communicate with. So I think that's that's kind of like an intervention that we really try to make sure that
The whole concept of a break, it has really been blurred because we study at home, we live at home as well.
that's
So we
true.
do need that external kind of from the org telling us not or like to take a break thing.
Mm, true.
Yeah. I thought
Um,
Bianca froze. She's still there. Okay.
I'm definitely. People think I'm an extrovert, but yeah, I saw this tweet by Kay loud introvert. Pala. Yeah, and I really resonated with it because even if I do need time to myself, I still want to like connect with people and talk to people about like all my various interests and passions because pursuing those alone is just really life sucking, which is why communities and like community building is so vital to me. Yeah, that's how I manage it, and I do better with like one-on-ones actually, or like small groups, which is like really large settings. So I feel like the pandemic kind of helped in the sense because that's how usually most online meetings go, like it's on a one-on-one or just like a small like Discord call, maybe like chica chica lang for how many hours.
I'm
That's
guilty
manageable.
pala. I always get the notif like that Bianca's in the develop co-working, but then I got so scared to join because I'm like, people. I'll try to join more though.
Oh, thank you. Don't worry. Like I don't buy it. Like the people usually join me. It's like it's just chill. Like we're just like we're working lang. But I need because you're like it's like in a Starbucks cafe for me. That's how Discord is. Like I need like the chat in order to like actually do my work. It's really helpful. I really recommend it. And oh yeah, this question pala from Chico. For Cams and Gwendolyn, what would you say is your greatest achievement so far with regards to your personal involvement in community building? Wow. So flex all you want, guys.
Okay. Hi, Chino. Thank you for the question. um, what is my greatest achievement? Honestly, as cheesy as it sounds, I think my greatest achievement is in my people, right? Every time I talk to my members, the the people in UX society, I'm always odd. Odd as in
But
AWD, odd. Odd by how great their growth has been, how far they have come, how much they have grown in the org, and how much they love the org, or how much they love the community. I'd say. I feel like that really speaks a lot to the way that you have built the community with them, and not just something that's for your own, right? For your own gain, for your own involvement, for your own connections. It's really nice to just hear their stories and hear their own achievements and own it, own their achievements as your own, because I feel like in a community that's really really something that you can't help but just be proud of the people that are in, because it really is a family. It really is involving everyone.
Yeah. As for me, I wouldn't say I've had an exactly long run in community building, but I at least the achievements I want to share are more on like working under community builders who have really like changed changed my life. So I guess from that other end, compared to like what Camille said, I've just like I guess the hmm, it's nice to like really feel safe and valued by like a certain group that you're in, and that's really something that I got from the community builders, like the genuine curiosity that they have about your life. And really in between there's a lot of like, oh, these are the book recommendations or this is what I'm doing. But I guess just in the catch ups that I do with my like with the I guess the community builder that I work under, and then also in like other the chapter leads of other universities, I find that I feel so honored honestly when they share things about like their family or how they're doing, that I feel like we're not even close. Why do I deserve to hear this? But what it really shows is the kind of space that they are trying to cultivate. And I guess like in response to that, I've learned to be a lot more vulnerable with other people and not to feel pressured to kind of perform at a certain level. I'm not sure if like what your high schools were like, but at least for me, it was, I guess, more of a meritocracy. So opportunities were inequitably channeled towards people with certain characteristics and with certain levels of performance. So that really instilled a desire to perform and to do well. How in contrast though, in like really safe communities that I've been in, is actually that vulnerability which has allowed me to achieve more, like actually get internships, discover things about myself, learn new skills. And since I do have like cognitive deficits with ADHD, like really develop my own like holistic kind of action plan around it. So yeah, I guess hoping that I will be able to like foster the same thing with other communities I'm part of. But at least in the area of personal growth, I'd say it's a win because it does enable me, right, to kind of be a better community builder in the future.
Oh, wow, I feel so aligned with you all right now. While I was rating like my goals and intentions, because I rewrite those every year. Like the more you grow, like the more your plans change and stuff. And then I realized that even if I'm like all over the place, like it's all tied by that one purpose, like just investing in others, because that's really like the most fulfilling and like priceless thing ever. Like I'm so proud when I see like the community members I've interacted with like a year before versus like a year now. They're like their own designers now, like earning their own thing in their own startups, or like teaching others and like building their own thing. It just makes me so I feel like a mom for everyone. And I'm so invested in everyone's growth. Like,
Truly.
yeah.
Did they like tell you? Actually, I'm kind of wondering, like, you guys prefer when people say thank you like on a regular basis, or do you just like one day receive fan mail from them and then you find out how they impacted you? You guys prefer?
I like
Oh.
the latter, actually. Like when I posted like my 2021 wins on Twitter, like this junior from my high school, Isabella, she reached out to me big on Twitter, and then like she sent us like this really sweet message, like, "Oh, I'm just trying to tell you this, but I really like admire you so much because like I too wanted to be in the STEM and the arts, but I thought I couldn't do it, but you showed me that it was possible." I was like, it took me a while to reply because I was like all I was so happy. Yeah, I really love like, and it's out of nowhere, plus you don't really expect it. So yeah. How about you, Cams?
Oh wait, I think Maggie is raising her hand.
Oh
I think she.
yeah, thank you for pointing it out. Yes, Maggie, you have a question.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Uh,
Hi.
thank you so much for organizing this talk. It's so super insightful. Thank you, Camille, Gwendolyn, and Bianca and Develop PH for just doing this. I'm learning so much. Really like coming from a very different background, and this is such an insightful talk. So I'll keep it quick. I think this is very connected to what Bianca has been just sharing before I went in, and like how do you guys keep center or how do you guys not get overwhelmed with, like gassing up your friends' projects, like having other people like do their own thing and be inspired by it? Like, I feel like you guys are so integrated with your work. Like, it's so different to separate your work, your org work, or like your future plans with yourself. So how do you guys like navigate the personal vision while you still, show up yourself in the organization, your community? So how do you navigate that? It's so amazing.
That's a really great question, I think. Yeah, that's made me like reflect on the way I perceive things, right? And I think for me, it's really a matter of perception. You see, like I do a lot of freelancing, yes, but a lot of it is really something that just comes from something that I've done before. So I just try to improve my existing practices or existing things, right? But the way that I get and innovate and learn is really from the organization. I Every single time it just amazes me how much I learn from people who are just starting. It's like getting their perspective really better enhances me as a designer, as a person of my own craft. And just really having more perspectives, the more perspective I get, the more that I can actually realize things that are wrong in the process that I do, in the systems that I do, in the work that I can better improve myself because of perspectives like these aren't things that are like, oh, these are the best practices of what a designer should be, right? But a lot of these early stage designers or a lot of these new members have really perspectives that come from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of very varying backgrounds that you begin to start to realize, oh right, that how about them? Did you also consider them? The others, right? You already start to think about the others. So I think it's that for me, it's really more of my perspective looking at them and really getting inspired. Yeah, that's about mine.
Yeah.
Go good.
Actually, I'm also, and before I answer, I'm also curious, like, I guess what industry or communities are you involved in for Maggie?
Right. Thanks for asking. I just spent 5 years in a veterinary research laboratory. So I led an operations team. So right now I'm transitioning the whole like different role in the spirituality and technology space. So very much tech, very much like community building. So it's very like 360 from my lab work. So but I do feel like there's so many things that I'm able to integrate, like coming from that background, taking it to this background. It's just a whole like different arena, but it's very much aligned to.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I'm really into spirituality. Maybe we should talk about it as well. But yeah, I guess to start off, right, let's go back to the reason that you joined the community. You joined the community because you believe that your own self-discipline isn't enough and that there's so much to gain from synergizing with others. So in that sense, like, I guess for me, like, since I do have a lot of things going on and I want to advance certain things in my life, like my health, then it does make sense to also find like-minded people just like that. So Camille's example is great. I think if you are already getting more or even what you want or even more from the community, then like it really energizes you and it doesn't hold you down. But whether we like it or not, in some cases, we are having to run communities, which I guess may be draining us a bit more than usual, especially as like the pandemic's really straining a lot of things these days. So with that, it's helpful to just remember the Pareto principle that like 20% of the people in your life, a certain few people will actually contribute to 80% of your growth. So I guess if there are certain areas of your life which you feel are really neglected, you can think like even at least just one friend that has actually inspired you in that aspect. And like I'm not saying like spend time with them just because of that, but just having their image, the image of them in your mind is I think already helpful enough. Like, maybe start turning on notice for their posts just so that you're aware of that, and really identifying, right, that 20% of people who will contribute to 80% of your growth can really help you find communities, not just within big groups but even within these small people. And yeah, like having people to go along with you, I think is so underrated. I've always thought like, okay, I need to push through it, my own discipline and all. but it can really go a long way. So that conversations that you have in your community, which may be more work related, well, you can have the same for more personal things. And like here, I didn't even know that other people were into spirituality. I don't know if you mean the same thing. I meant like, subconscious kind of manifestation mindset. Yeah, like you'll never know, right? When there are people out there unless you say it out loud.
Yeah, and can I just add, Maggie, I don't know, I'm really inspired by you, like your story, just how what you said, and you coming into this, right? Into this talk, this really small talk, but really getting and just absorbing so much is really amazing and it inspires me. That's what I see, even like with these communities, it really inspires me to see people like you.
Oh man, like honor is mine. I feel like I have so things to catch on, but like just immersing myself in your generation, it's so inspiring. And it gives me even more hope to like really push through with, our personal visions, aligning ourselves with whatever the collective would like to like move forward with. I feel like we're moving towards a new earth right now. There's so many systems that's being like deconstructed for us to build again. So these communities really amplify like these different voices for us to just commune together. Like what you guys said, like there's a huge difference between just an organizations between a community because it fosters like so much growth. And there's like the fact that we just witness each other like talking about this. It's sort of an activation within each of us. So I'm so grateful for something like this.
Yes, and please connect. Like, I'd love to share your social links and continue the convo. But I'm so glad this conversation happened. Like again, so many of the gems here like resonated with me. Yes. Any last questions before we wrap up for tonight? Calling once, twice, thrice. If not, that caps up our fireside chat for today. But let me drop in our speakers things that we can if you want to continue reading to them about like org design, community design, or spirituality or anything, you can reach them. They are very, very approachable. So I just dropped in the chat the LinkedIn, Twitter of Gwen, and then the LinkedIn and website of Cams. And again, like you would love to get yours as well.
I remember when
yes.
Yeah, I remember when Camille was a freshman, she was showing us like the first iteration of her portfolio website. It was in like an Ateneo classroom. It was on her computer, on her laptop.
Oh my gosh, that was
Let's see how it looks now.
Guys, I really did CSS and then I discovered web, so I was like, okay, this made it a lot easier. But
Wait,
yeah,
so I know we're gonna take a picture. Can I just say Camille really inspired me because when she introduced herself in her freshman year, she was like, "Hi, I'm Camille, like from BS." She said her whole course, BS Management Information Systems, MS Computer Science, and I just love the confidence because normally, in school, high school, people would like feel like you're mayabang or something. But yeah, from then on, I'm like, should radiate my light just like her.
yes, manifesting. That's the energy we want for 2022. But yeah, definitely. I've always been also really, really in awe with Gwen and Bianca also here. Your growth, the way that you build communities is also really something I look up to, and I'm really, really proud of you guys also. And definitely, thank you so much to everyone here. I know that you guys being here today is really already a testament of how much you consider communities to be important as of importance, and I'm sure that you guys will do amazing building communities of your own. So please do connect with us if you can. Our socials are here, so just feel free to connect with us, and we'd love to have we'd love to discuss things over a coffee or lunch or dinner.
Yeah, can't wait to share this with everyone once it's posted. online. I'm sure like a lot of people would also like resonate with what you said here. So yeah, thank you everyone. Have a good night. Bye. Thank you.